You want to be the best there is. You want to have the skills to any and everything. There's one secret. There's literally one secret. It's the easiest thing when you hear it. What? You thought you thought I'd tell you the secret? That'll be $500 if you want to know the secret. That's like $500 right there. I gotta pay my bills, man. I'm definitely not gonna tell you that the secret to being a better hacker is taking good notes. Seriously. It's the most cliche. What's the word that I'm thinking of? It's simple. It's something that not many people want to hear. But I promise you, if your notes really good, it'll be more fun. You'll have a much easier time at hacking. You don't believe me? You know, they never believe me. Sit down. Don't touch your mouse. Don't touch your keyboard. Listen to this for a second. I'm gonna explain and I'm gonna show you a few things with just notes, how we can reach beyond the recon phase. Does this sound familiar to you? I did a little recon, then I did a little more recon.
A little more recon, and recon, and recon.
And you never leave past the recon phase. Well, that's because you're not taking well enough notes. Your notes aren't good enough. You don't know what to do next. You're not asking the right questions. Let me show you a few things. And by the time this video is over, you'll be a much better hacker than you were before this video. Don't hack me with this. What if you guys hacked me with this information that you're getting? Whatever. Let's jump in.
Psych.
We're not jumping in yet. Just give me like 10 seconds. I promise. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, comment, whatever you want to do. Just do some stuff. You know what I mean? Whatever that is. Let's jump in. Let me show you a few things. Okay. So to show you what I mean, I need to give a little more context. Now, this video is not a step-by-step guide on how to hack, right? This video covers the steps of hacking, you know, things like pre-engagement, then reconnaissance, then vulnerability identification, then exploitation, post-exploitation, and then, you know, you have like your reporting piece. So we follow the flow, but what I am focusing on in this video is the gap between reconnaissance and vulnerability identification, and also the exploitation. So there is a gap in the hacking world, ethical hacking world, where someone wants to get into ethical hacking. So users want to get into ethical hacking. And what happens is they learn how to do recon. And some people learn how to do recon very well. In fact, you get a lot of results. You find a lot of endpoints. You find a lot of content, but you get stuck. You don't know what to do with that information. And you don't know where to look. And you just end up scratching your head and you move on. You do more reconnaissance, you scratch your head, you move on. It becomes a cycle, a death cycle. So there is a way to break out of that cycle. In fact, reconnaissance is very useful if you know what you're doing. And this demonstration will help you to overcome that recon hurdle and will propel you to the vulnerability identification side of things. Now, there are people who are really good at, you know, finding bugs, at penetration testing, at finding exploitations, at identifying 0 days. Those people are great at asking questions, exploring the answers to those questions, taking great notes. Some of those people might be good at understanding pieces of technology. Maybe they used a specific system for a while and they've learned it inside out. There are a lot of things that are factored in when we're talking about a good hacker. One of the critical, important things in that is taking good notes, because regardless of how you learn how to be a good hacker, it always starts with some kind of research, knowledge gathering, and understanding. And at the bane of that research, knowledge gathering, and hacking lies notes. Notes is what you'll need in order to become the best hacker. And if you think about it, even while learning a lot of these things that hackers learn, notes is usually where they go in order to capture that knowledge, to understand the research that they're doing, and to further develop in whatever area they're trying to develop. So a lot of stuff said here. Let me show you what I mean. Now, in this video, I've already done reconnaissance on my target. In this case, we're going to give Starbucks some free content and free promotion. Why not? I'm not going to do any probing with like automated tools and things like that, because I don't want to cross any boundaries when we're talking about scope and things like that. If you're into bug bounty, you know what that stuff is. What I'm going to do is show you how to take notes that can lead you to questions and also further research that can propel you beyond reconnaissance. That's it. Now, let's jump in. So post reconnaissance, I usually have notes formatted in an Excel document, something like this. So I have our subdomains. I do have other things. So I have, other domains here, but let's focus on this here. So I have subdomains, and then I have, you know, the protocol. I have status codes, the method, whether it's get, post, options, things like that. I have content length. I have the server response, so the title of the server response. If the web server is identified, I will put that here. The IP address of the web server, the technology used, and then I have some notes. And these are just general notes here. Now, great. This is good reconnaissance, but what next? Stay tuned. Okay, so I'm going to show you some things. So with this Excel document, what we are going to do is pretty much look through and start picking like a main website. So let's say app.starbucks.com. That's a main website. Now, what we want to do is start building an understanding of how traffic flows and seeing what technologies are used between these subdomains. What I mean by that is if we go to app.starbucks.com and there's a login page here, well, there's a good chance that that login page is tied to another subdomain, something like api.starbucks.com, for example, and that might have a path called login. We need to understand that flow because now the API, by going through the API, maybe we can do something with app.starbucks. Who knows? We need to start looking through that. So we'll do this. We'll start off with app.starbucks.com. Let's minimize this and let's go here. Show you how to take these notes that are great and perfect. So you see we have the join now, the sign in, find a store. You have your basic page here, start in order. What we're going to do is this. We're going to click on join now. Looks like there is no SSO. It's just regular joining. Great. So what we do here is we now will open the dev tools and go to the network tab. Here, what I want to do is start building the flow. So I'm going to open up a tool that I like to take notes on called Logsec. It's a free tool. Just Google Logsec. I'm sure it'll come up. All right. Here, we're going to start a new page here. So what I'm going to do is at the bottom here, create new page, and then we're going to call this my browser. And I'll explain why we're doing this in a second. All right, my browser. So what we're doing is my browser is going to send, we're on this page, right? So my browser is on this page. Boom. Now let's click on that. We are going to send a post request with my browser. So we're just following the traffic flow. So now we're on this page and I'll show you how this looks and why it makes things easy to follow and everything. So we'll say path. We'll call this ethical. Email address is going to be just something random. I don't really care. I don't think Starbucks verifies emails anyway. Password will be, doesn't matter. So it's actually going to be something random as well. And then it needs an exclamation mark there. All right, perfect. I don't care to get emails. It needs one number. Boom. Agree. Okay. Now this is what we need to keep track of. So right now we are at the create, and then we have a return URL and it returns to app.starbucks.com. So it's just returning to itself, but behind the login wall. All right. So when we create, we're going to look at the network flow of what happens. Normally we can do this in like Burp Suite. In fact, it might be a lot easier to just follow the flow with Burp Suite, like look at burp history and things like that. And I would probably prefer to look at burp history, but for the sake of this demo, something simple where we can just follow along. So we create, we see that it's a post request to create. So let's just copy that URL. Doesn't really matter. We already have that copied anyway, so it actually doesn't matter. Okay. So the first thing we see is that there is a GET request to app.starbucks.com, and we have a bunch of headers and everything. So what we'll do is this. Account create, and then this first links to like this app.starbucks.com, and we entered some post information, so I'll just put that in little quotations here. We entered sign up info. Normally I would actually write down the info here, but for the sake of this. All right, so first thing we did is we have this header, and I'm going to look at the raw header here. So this is what, there you go, this is what we got as a response, and that's what I want to jot down. So we'll just type in response, and I usually look at that later, right? You look at the content security policy. For that, you can look at things like, and I guess maybe one day I'll actually do a video on bug bounty. But for that, I look at things that might be shared, like shared domain. So if it was like wildcard.amazonaws.com, well, then technically if I spin up an EC2 instance, then the content security policy would allow that. So you see something like this where s3.amazonaws.com. Well, if you have like, I don't know, if you're able to find server-side request forgery, you just spin up an S3 bucket and you can chain that with some other stuff. So that's what you look at, things like that. so we have the response. Let's look at the request, the actual request. So here, let's actually turn that off. And then here, let's turn this on. And let's look at the request that we sent. It was a GET request, so nothing too crazy. But let's just jot that in anyway. Boom. So we got that. Now we go to the next one. Now this looks like analytics. We don't care about that. Again, more analytics. We just skip over the analytics and we go down to the next one. So now we get a JS file. So I don't know what this JS file does. We have a request and we have the response. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy URL and let's go to the JS file after this. So what we do is we enter that link there, the JS file, and then boom. So now we can keep going. Right. So now we have CSS. I don't care about CSS for this demo, and I'm looking at the file here. Okay. Now there's something called TrustArc, which consent, notice, domain, app, starbucks.com, and then it has some other stuff, notice type, consent.trustarc.com. Now, this is good, right? Because we don't know what this is. And so when you don't know what something is, generally you want to do some research on this. We can see that DevTools says it's for tracking, and it says that it was blocked. The status was blocked. So I don't want to jot this down in our notes, but in case you didn't know what TrustArc was, you would just Google this and just say, what is TrustArc? And you would try to get more information on that. So privacy compliance company. And because it was blocked, I really don't care to follow that at the moment. Okay, so here you basically do the same thing. So you have the request. Well, this time we're just going to copy the URL. I'll try to make this quick. Paste that, boom, and that's the flow we follow. Same here. Actually, I'm not going to go down and copy all the JS files because I'm not actually, doing a test on this. We're going to assume that we follow the JS files, and then we'll go down and look at next CSS files we don't really care about. This Ponos 0.0, we don't know what this is, so we'd like to take a look, and it looks like it's originating from appstarbucks.com. So we are going to take a quick peek at what this might be, and let's say, there's a URL scan. That's interesting. What is 0.0? What is it used for? I guess Reddit is, they want me to click on Reddit. It's literally saying hello world. That's interesting. Service used by CROs. I investigated, but it seems is a part of a service from F5. So S5 is like a load balancer kind of service. It does reverse proxying from external domains. Okay, some say it's some sort of CDN network. I actually don't know what 0.0 is. So we would add this to our notes and try to figure out what it is, but I wouldn't add it as a path, like a request path. So what we'll do is we'll go here and we'll look at this as a request path. Okay, CSS, don't care about JS. Drink finder, this looks interesting. So we'll add this, get a 200. Let's look at the request header, see what we post. We actually don't post anything here, but our browser does reach out. So do this, value, copy, and we'll add this here. Now I'm not gonna send the post and request data for now, just so I can make this faster. We'll do one more. We'll do at privacy permissions. This looks pretty cool. We'll do this. Yeah, let's do this. Why not? Click on this and click on this, and then we can show you what I mean. Okay, so we basically just follow the paths that our web browser has gone through. So what happens is a web browser goes here, gets a response, then it goes to next, gets a response, next, gets a response, sends out, and then it just goes through the process. Gets a response, sends here, gets a response, sends here, gets a response. The idea is as you're getting these responses, you can then see what's being sent back. If your web browser is storing anything, like if it's storing a token or something, you might be able to see that. Especially if you go to the storage tab, you can start seeing the authorization. And this should also be, you should start seeing things in the headers that are sent back and forth as well, analyzing. But really you're seeing where your browser is sending out traffic, and you're seeing how the interaction takes place between your web browser and multiple servers that belong to Starbucks. So when you actually look at this, right, let's say I have this graph view. Boom. So if I'm going to trace this, I'll start my web browser. I know that I created an account. After I created an account, my web browser went to app.starbucks. After that, I went to, it grabbed a JS file. After that, it grabbed another JS file. Then it grabbed drink finder, it grabbed privacy permission. So this is just one path my web browser went down as I log in. Now, you're going to have multiple paths that you're going to go down as you continue to just build out an environment's network. And this is definitely going to take some time. It'll take probably a few weeks for larger scales or larger scopes, a few days for smaller scopes, 24 hours if it's a really small scope. But now you have information where you can now click on the create. you would see your information, what you entered, and you would start now saying, if you entered it and it was like username header. Well, now you can start here. You can start saying, well, what if I entered, a malicious character? And then you would ask that question, right? And so what you can, and maybe you went out and started Googling some things like, username bug and stuff like that. And you found that someone did XSS, or you found that someone did SQL injection, or you found that someone, their username was an email and someone did some kind of email based XSS or email based injection or something like that. That's what you're looking for. And then you want to spend some time to really understand, okay, well, now we can look at some of the, you can look at the inspector and see how username is, but really you can start looking at Burp Suite and things like that and seeing, okay, well, what kind of endpoint what's the endpoint that gets called when you go to the username thing? Is it app.starbucks.com? And if so, is that an API or is that just a native application that's accepting, user input? And it also gives you paths, right? So you have the create path that popped up, which is what we logged, that create path. And theoretically, we would have our request information in our response information. So now we have, let's say we have our username. Now we have paths to go down. We can try some XSS. We can create an account for that and then have an XSS payload and see what happens. We can create an account for SQLi, see what happens. We can create an account with the username payload being like email injection. If it was email was username, see what happens. So this would be 3 different accounts. So just say, 3 accounts. And then you would go next. And the next would be something like email. And you would try some email based stuff, assuming that email wasn't part of the username. And then now once you have a scope here, so I call this exploit mapping. I call this exploit mapping because what you're doing is you're now asking questions and you're writing down those questions because you're going to go through everything you have like very thoroughly. All of the headers, all of the post data, all of the get endpoints, all the endpoints you've captured. So you know that app.starbucks.com has an account create path and almost acts like an API, but it might not be an API. We don't know yet, but you know that it has some kind of behavior that might resemble one. So now you know that, once you do that, it has the regular app. And now you go here, right? So now you can look at some headers and you see content language, ENUS, and you can do something like, if you're really new to the bounty space, you can do something like that. And then you can say bug report, content language, bug report. Let's see, content language header, misuse header name error when calling eBay API. And then, this might not be like a bug free report, but this is something to give you more information on how content language is working, for example. You read through that and maybe you might want to go down and click on community tab and try to figure out, okay, well, here's an error and this was also eBay API. So that's funny, but you get the idea. You go through this stuff and you start figuring out how these header work, how things like that works. Then you go to the next endpoint, right? So you have the JS file. Here, what you'll do is you can actually grab this JS file. Let's copy that and let's open up the browser and let's just go to the JS file. So here you would copy this. You can prettify if you want. It's actually relatively short. And then you would go and see if you can start looking through and making sense of what some of this stuff is. A lot of it will, just does require knowledge of JavaScript, but you can start looking for things like hidden secrets. Maybe you can understand more about the application this way. In this case, it's just this is a vendor-based JavaScript, so it's in one of the libraries that's being used, but get the point there. Then you start following more, right? So you have another JavaScript file. Just paste that. Boom. Then you have another big JavaScript file. And again, you want to look at hidden endpoints. You want to look at things that might help, like ordering, PDP. I don't know what that is. Gift card category contents. So you have like these key terms that can help you start figuring out how the developer is thinking. And then looks like they're assigning number values to that. So you jot these things down as notes. And then if you start coming across like ordering PDP and a number value, well, now you know that, this JavaScript file was referencing it for some reason. Update password content. And you want to make sure you have that in your notes. Then you go string finding, you keep doing the same thing. Import the request headers, the responses, and eventually you end up with not only a graph, but a graph that you can just click on and you can see how everything's working. So if you're here and you're like, okay, at one point my web browser reaches out to set privacy permissions. Well, you click here and you can see like a header. If you have the notes here, you say something like, I don't know, is it possible to change the privacy permissions, right? And so notes, this is the best thing I would recommend. It's just taking notes on things. Once you've exhausted everything that you can think of for the apps.create page, this page here, well, you can click on it and maybe you add a done, just like that. Boom. Yes, rename that to done. And now you go to your graph. I'm going to just move this a little bit. So now you can see that it says done, meaning that your web browser did reach out to this, but it is completed. You go to these. Now, what happens if you want to follow another path? Now, this is where it gets pretty cool, right? So if I want to follow another path and I want to go to the app.starbucks.com and I do this and enter. And now my web browser is going to app.starbucks.com. And in that, there's a few other paths. Let's say that. Well, now I can see that my web browser, it doesn't matter if it goes to account create, it redirects to the app.starbucks, or it goes straight to the app.starbucks. So it kind of branches off and it ends up in the same place. And it kind of starts creating this graph for you where you can start going through each process and each flow. Eventually, you'll see things like api.starbucks.com. So let's say it was, go to my browser. Let's say it was like api.starbucks.com / let's say it was create api.starbucks. Let's say you noticed that there was also, login. And then let's say you also notice that it was account, to view your account. So you start looking at the graph. Now you see your web browser is reaching out in a bunch of different places. But one thing you can take note of is the API paths are still easy to understand, easy to read. And if you look, there's an api.starbucks.com endpoint that now reaches out to those paths. So now as you're logging your API, you're not only seeing how your web browser interacts with the API, but you're seeing all the API endpoints that exist. And then you can start looking more into the flow. So this would be like, let's say this api.starbucks.com create was attached to the app.starbucks, there'd be another line drawn to the app.starbucks. So you know that in order to manipulate the create feature for app.starbucks, you have to go through the API, meaning you're going to start here and you're going to ask questions like, how can I find things here? How can I find things? Those are the questions that you're going to need, because if you can find things in api.starbucks.com.create/create and it was attached to app.starbucks.com, then you can use this API to grab information from this app, because at the end of the day, the API is the one that's distributing the information and app.starbucks.com is relaying that information. So this is what's important for ethical hacking, how to improve. It's taking notes in a way where you can visualize everything that's happening, and then you can start asking questions. What happens if I do something to the create feature in the API? How does that affect the app.starbucks? Well, now we can test it out. We can click here and we can just start, looking at the requests, the response, and we can start going through a lot of those things and just trying as many things as we want. If it doesn't work, again, you just click something like, nothing found. You rename the file, you go to your graph view, and you move on to the next one. And as you start to learn more information, you go back and you start seeing what you've tried. So, ideally you'd be taking comprehensive notes. So like, I tried something like this, I tried this, and then you would have like all the things you tried. As you learn more information, you would have more things to try that you have not done. You go back to this and you start looking more, you start trying those things. This is a process that generally when I am on a bug hunt, I spend months, almost probably a year sometimes when it comes to some of these platforms, because I'm building out how these platforms work and I'm trying to make sense of everything so that I can ask the right questions. This is what you do during Recon so that you can understand what happens after Recon. After Recon, you're really trying to make sure you understand how everything's working so that when you start asking the right questions, the questions apply to what did the Recon did that you have. Now, of course, going back to the Excel sheet that I took, we know app.starbucks.com has all of these technologies. So Amazon S3, web services, Azure front door. So these are also things that we can keep in mind and we can look for when we're jotting our notes and creating our map. At one point, we should see some kind of request out to Amazon S3 or Amazon Web Services, something in our browser in order to get some kind of piece of information. So as we continue to map this out, we will start to see Amazon AWS stuff out here and things like that. And we jot that down, right? Those things that we jot down. So this is what I mean by taking notes. This is what you do. You start writing down in these flows here, right? So account, and let's say this was let's do this. Let's do one that says actual login. So now you start writing flows that says something like, for login, what you want to do is check for SSO bones. Maybe you want to JWT altercation, alteration for login. Maybe you want to log in with admin as email. Maybe you want to add special characters to email, chars to email. Maybe you want to do MFA bypass. Maybe you want to do SQLI. You're just going to keep researching. You can start doing, you pop open your web browser and you can just type in like vulnerabilities on web app logins, web app login. And you start seeing these vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, exec injection. Write these down in your notes, because then what you want to do is you want to go through and research these. So now, you can try to do XSS on a login. So now you just write XSS on login page and scraping login credentials with XSS. So you click on something like this, you start learning about it. Where does those notes go? Those notes go here. Or you can put them in a knowledge base, whatever. But ideally you would have something like that, XSS, and you would just, you could link the content. So maybe you have a link to the content. You can say things to try. So you can see as you're going, you're building almost like infinite possibilities of things you can try. And you're just going through, you're just cranking them out. It can take up to a year. Be patient. It can take 2 years. I mean, I've seen someone, stay on the same bug bounty platform the entire time. Just never left one company. They just stayed on it for as long as I've seen. And that was several years, probably 3 to 4 years. So this is what I mean by taking really good notes. This can be a difference between getting stuck after recon, not knowing what to do, and actually writing out things that you are doing and researching these things and actually going down and trying them. Then, as you learn in cybersecurity and as you grow, you go back to these things, right? So you're like, okay, I didn't find anything on login, but I learned some new strategies I saw on, Twitter, LinkedIn, Medium. I just found new strategies to try, and I found new ways to learn this technology. Well, what you can do is go to login and things that you haven't tried, XYZ. Let's say you haven't tried these things. Well, now you can jot them down. And the ones you have tried, you can just say done. Or you can just say nothing. I don't know. And the ones that you haven't tried, you'll say QRS. Now you go and try these things. So this is how you improve in hacking. It's by being patient, taking great notes, being diligent, making sure that you're being as thorough as possible. And trust me, you will find a plethora of bugs this way. Eventually, it's not going to come overnight, but as you learn and as you keep going back to these things, not only are you going to find a plethora of bugs, but you will understand how the network of this company is so well that you may not want to leave, because then you have to start the whole process over again. But 2, so well that finding these bugs will become less difficult, because now you know how things work and you know where bugs are commonly found in some of these technologies. For example, you'll know where the API interferes with a lot of the features in this Starbucks environment. And you'll know that if there's a bug somewhere in one side of the API, that bug might exist in another side that someone else may not know, because the API paths aren't obvious. But if you're building out the network here, the API paths will become very obvious, because you're going to stumble across mini paths and things there. So notes, that's a secret. This is your secret, being better, being a better hacker. You've made it to the end of the video. Give yourself a pat on the back. Congratulations. Thanks for watching. Seriously. If you enjoyed this video, stay tuned, because I have a lot more videos in the works coming. I plan to upload videos on the recon steps, how to do recon, things like how to start asking the right questions, a critical thinking step, migrating from recon and actually showing that migration to the initial attack phase, throughout the exploitation steps, post-exploitation, writing great reports, so that if you want to go into pen testing or bug bounty, you can have those reports. And also just for other cybersecurity professionals, I do want to get into some content that can help others. I'm a security engineer by default, so I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats, and that includes defensive things like setting up web application firewalls, setting up regular firewalls, right? Like network firewalls, doing things like setting up CM tools like Splunk, for example, how to actually create dashboards and stuff, how to one, create an incident response plan, how to lead that incident response plan. One cool thing that I'm doing now is creating an entire cybersecurity plan from scratch. So it's like risk management process, incident response, software development lifecycle, doing things like business continuity plan, like from scratch. So I would love to share that information for free with the greater community. I think information should be shared freely without having to pay thousands of dollars, as unfortunate world has bestowed upon us. And with the free sharing of information, it will help others, such as yourself, to get into the cybersecurity space, because it will make me happy to see everyone succeed. That's what the Ethical Fam is for, and that's what the Ethical Fam will be. Again, I appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you hit that notification bell. Bap out.